Eric had always wanted a fresh start, and when he found the listing for a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, he didn't think twice. The rent was suspiciously low, but the photos looked clean, and the landlord seemed normal enough. An older man with tired eyes who simply handed him the keys and muttered, "Just don't mess with the mirror." Eric had laughed it off at the time. Every old place had quirks. Maybe it was nailed to the wall or had some sentimental value. He didn't care. He needed out of his old life. A broken relationship, a dead-end job, and a city that never felt like home. This move was supposed to be a reset. The apartment itself was a little dusty, but charming. Hardwood floors creaked with every step, and the walls carried that aged paint smell of something forgotten. Still, it was furnished, cozy, and quiet. Sunlight poured through tall windows during the day, giving the living room a soft, golden glow. And then there was the mirror. It stood in the hallway outside the bedroom, tall, antique, with an ornate wooden frame carved in swirling patterns. It looked expensive, maybe even centuries old. Eric tried to move it at first, but it wouldn't budge. Bolted directly to the wall. That night, Eric unpacked a few essentials, ordered takeout, and collapsed on the old couch. He glanced toward the hallway as he chewed on his food, noticing how the mirror reflected just a sliver of the living room. It caught the edge of the hallway, showing his doorway and a shadowy portion of the wall behind him. Something about it made him uneasy. Maybe it was the way the glass looked almost too clean. Or maybe it was just the way the mirror stood in that narrow hallway, silently reflecting the emptiness. He shrugged it off. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or haunted objects. Mirrors were just glass and shadows were just shadows. Later that night, brushing his teeth in the bathroom, he caught himself staring into the mirror a little longer than usual. Not because of anything strange, just because his reflection stared back, tired and a little pale under the fluorescent light. He blinked. The reflection blinked. Everything normal. He shut the light and walked to the bedroom. As he passed the hallway mirror again, he noticed it. A flicker. Tiny movement. He froze. It had only been for a second, but he could have sworn his reflection lingered half a beat longer after he stopped walking, like it was reluctant to stop moving. He turned back to look, now facing the mirror head-on. Nothing. Just his tired face and messy hair staring back. "Get it together," he muttered. That night, Eric had trouble sleeping. His bed was comfortable enough, and the street outside was quiet. But every creak in the floorboards, every shifting shadow from the window blinds made his eyes snap open. At one point, he could have sworn he heard something faint, a gentle tapping sound like fingernails against glass. Tap, tap, tap. He sat up, heart racing, holding his breath. Silence. He stayed like that for several minutes before finally lying back down and closing his eyes. It was probably just the building settling. Old places made weird noises, that's all. But even as he drifted off into a light, uneasy sleep, one thought kept pushing itself into the front of his mind. Why did the landlord mention the mirror? The next morning, Eric awoke to find everything seemingly normal. Sunlight bathed the apartment in warmth and birds chirped somewhere outside. He made coffee and went about unpacking more of his things. But every time he passed that hallway, he couldn't help but glance at the mirror. Just a glance. It was still there, of course. Still perfect. Still silent. Still watching. Over the next few days, Eric settled into a routine. He explored the neighborhood, started working remotely from home, and tried to shake off the growing sense of discomfort that had crept in since his move. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, and that damn mirror had started feeling more like a presence than a piece of furniture. It wasn't like it did anything, exactly. It just sat there, unmoving. But every time Eric walked past it, he found himself glancing, checking. He'd walk down the hallway, eyes shifting to the glass, just to make sure his reflection was doing exactly what it should. At first, it always was. But then the little things started happening. One morning, as Eric walked past the mirror with a mug of coffee in his hand, he paused. His reflection held the mug in the wrong hand. Left instead of right. He blinked, backed up a step, and looked again. Now it was correct, a right hand, just like him. He stood there for a moment, heart-thumping, staring into the mirror. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or he was groggy from lack of sleep. Then came the smile. It happened 2 nights later. Eric had just finished brushing his teeth and was heading back to bed. As usual, he passed the hallway mirror without much thought. But out of the corner of his eye, something caught him, movement. He stopped and turned slowly. His reflection stood just as he did, posture mirrored perfectly. But as Eric looked closer, his stomach twisted into a knot. The reflection was smiling. Not a wide grin or anything cartoonish. Just a small, subtle curl of the lips. Eric wasn't smiling. He stood frozen, staring into the mirror, trying to convince himself it was some weird muscle twitch, some illusion. Maybe he'd unconsciously moved the corners of his mouth. Maybe the reflection blinked. Then, as if realizing it had been caught, its expression dropped back into a neutral face. Eric stumbled back, nearly knocking over a lamp behind him. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the mirror was still there, still pristine, still reflecting nothing unusual. But Eric was shaken. Something was wrong, and for the first time, he began to truly believe it. He grabbed a blanket and covered the mirror completely, pinning the fabric at the top with thumbtacks. He told himself it was temporary, that he just needed a break from his own paranoia. Out of sight, out of mind. That night, he slept better. Not well, but better. No tapping noises, no smiles, no creepy reflections. He started to feel a little more in control again. But the next morning, the blanket was on the floor, neatly folded. Eric stared at it in stunned silence. He hadn't folded it. He was sure he hadn't. He'd pinned it over the mirror hastily, and now here it was, lying in a perfect square on the floor at the base of the mirror like a quiet warning. His reflection greeted him calmly. No smiles. No gestures. Just Eric. But something in the back of his mind whispered, it's getting bolder. For the rest of the day, Eric avoided the hallway. He worked from his bedroom, used the bathroom down the hall without looking into the glass, and tried to stay distracted. But every sound, every subtle creak made him feel like he wasn't alone in the apartment. That night, he took his phone and tried to record the mirror, just to prove he wasn't crazy. He set the phone up on a tripod and hit record, leaving it pointed toward the mirror as he went to bed. Hours later, he woke with a jolt, heart pounding, and checked the recording. It had been going fine, just static footage of the hallway until around 2:37 a.m. Then, the screen glitched. The frame jumped slightly, the lighting shifted. And for exactly 4 seconds, the reflection of Eric wasn't alone. Another figure appeared next to it. Vague, blurry, but definitely humanoid. It leaned in close to the mirrored Eric and whispered something inaudible, then vanished when the footage glitched again. Eric watched that section over and over, his skin crawling, heart racing. When he checked the video again the next day, the file had corrupted. Unplayable. It was then he knew this wasn't just his imagination. Someone was in the mirror. And it was watching him. Eric avoided the mirror for days. He worked from his bed, took showers with the bathroom door slightly open just to let some hallway light in, and brushed his teeth while staring at the faucet instead of the mirror. But even then he could feel it, the weight of his own reflection pressing against the glass, waiting for him to look again. The feeling of being watched never left. And then it happened. Late one night, around 3 a.m., Eric woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding headache. He shuffled out of bed toward the kitchen, passing the hallway and the mirror without thinking. Then he saw it. There were 2 reflections in the mirror. He stopped cold. At first, he thought maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him in the dim light. But no, there they were. 2 Erics. One stood exactly where he was, wearing the same t-shirt and pajama pants, arms slightly outstretched from walking. But beside that reflection stood another figure, identical in every way. Same hair, same face, same sleepy posture, but not the same movements. The second Eric turned to face the first one, slowly, deliberately, and then looked directly at Eric, the real one, with cold, calculating eyes. Eric gasped and stumbled backward. When he looked again, there was only one reflection. Just him, staring wide-eyed into the glass. He wanted to scream, but his throat closed up. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst through his chest. He backed into the kitchen and leaned against the fridge, trying to breathe. No more games. Something was in there. Something that looked exactly like him. But it wasn't him. The next night, Eric worked up the courage to try something different. He stood in front of the mirror around the same time, 3 a.m., phone in hand, recording. The hallway was dim, but the reflection was clear. He waved. His reflection waved back. In sync. He tilted his head. The reflection followed. Then he reached into his pocket with his right hand. The reflection used its left. Eric froze. A moment later, the reflection corrected itself, now reaching with the right hand. But the delay had already exposed it. This wasn't just a mirror anymore. He stepped closer. The glass looked the same, clean, undistorted, but there was something wrong with the depth. It didn't feel like a reflection anymore. Felt like a window. And then the reflection did something he wasn't doing. It smiled again. Slow. White. Deliberate. Eric stepped back in horror, watching as the reflection held its gaze, mouthing something silently. At first, he couldn't understand. The words didn't form anything familiar. But then it repeated, slower this time, exaggerating the movements. Let me out. Eric's skin crawled. He turned off the camera, backed away, and ran to his room, slamming the door shut behind him. He didn't sleep, didn't even close his eyes. He just sat on the bed, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the door. In the silence, he thought he heard something faint, like whispers, muffled and far away, echoing through the walls. The next morning, exhausted and barely functional, he opened his camera app to review the recording. The video was still there, but the moment where the reflection moved independently, gone. The video had stopped 5 seconds before the weird part happened. Just frozen, like the phone had refused to keep filming. Eric tossed the phone aside, grabbed his keys, and left the apartment for the day. He sat in a nearby cafe for hours, just trying to clear his head, trying to come up with any kind of rational explanation. But the truth was becoming harder to deny. There was something in that mirror, something that wore his face. And now it was trying to communicate, trying to cross over. And worst of all, it knew he was scared. Eric couldn't stay away from the apartment forever. He returned that evening just before sunset, hesitating at the door. For a long moment, he stood there with the key in his hand, listening as if something inside might reveal itself through the wood. But there was only silence. Inside, nothing seemed out of place. The same stale air. The same stillness. The hallway was dark and the mirror was right where he left it, undisturbed, spotless. He walked past it with his head down and locked himself in the bedroom. That night, Eric didn't sleep. Instead, he opened his laptop and started digging. He had never bothered researching the apartment before moving in. The price was good, the landlord non-intrusive. But now he needed answers. He started by searching the apartment complex's name, then the specific address. Nothing. But when he added the keywords incident, missing, and tenant, one link stood out. A forum post, dated 3 years ago. My brother lived in apartment 3B before he vanished. No forced entry. Nothing stolen. Everything was still there: phone, wallet, shoes by the door. Only thing the cops found weird was a journal under the floorboards and a huge mirror he'd never bought himself. Anyone ever hear of weird stuff happening at Rose Hill Flats? Eric's chest tightened. That was his apartment. Apartment 3B. He messaged the user, not expecting a reply. Then he went into the hallway, flashlight in hand, and began inspecting the floor near the mirror. It was nearly 2 a.m. He tapped gently along the floorboards, trying to feel for something hollow. After several minutes of crawling and tapping, he found a loose plank, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. He pried it up and reached inside. A thin, battered notebook lay inside. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowing. He opened it and began to read. October 12th, saw myself blink out of sync again. I know it's not me. I can't sleep. It watches. It mimics. October 19th, he smiled today. I didn't. He's getting smarter. I think he's learning to pretend better. October 27th, I put a sheet over the mirror. He uncovered it. Not physically, I woke up and it was folded on the ground. Like he's mocking me. November 2nd, he tried to speak to me. No sound. Just lips moving. I think he said, "Let me out." November 6th, I dreamed I was stuck behind the glass. Screaming. Watching someone else live my life. November 8th, I think he wants to trade places. Eric's hands trembled as he turned the final page. There was one last line, written in shaky letters. If you're reading this, it's already watching you, too. He dropped the notebook. His breathing quickened. His mind raced. This had happened before. And that tenant, whoever he was, had vanished. Eric stood slowly, flashlight beam darting nervously toward the mirror. It stood silently, reflecting the hallway. Nothing out of place. But then, just for a split second, his reflection winked at him. Eric stumbled backward, heart hammering, nearly dropping the flashlight. He stared into the mirror, but now it showed only his pale, wide-eyed face. He returned to the bedroom and locked the door. Something was clear now. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. The mirror wasn't haunted by a ghost or spirit in the traditional sense. It was a trap, or worse, a portal. One that led somewhere or something that wanted out. And it had already succeeded once. The previous tenant never left, because someone else had walked out in his place. Eric didn't leave the apartment the next day. He was too afraid someone or something else might be the one walking back in his skin. He sat at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of him, going through every page again, hoping to find some pattern, some clue. Anything that could explain how to stop it. The handwriting grew more unstable toward the end, the entries more frantic. But certain patterns emerged. There were rules, not written out like a guide, but Eric pieced them together from the notes. Never cover the mirror. It didn't like that. Never stare for too long. That gave it time to mimic and adapt. Never speak to it. It learned faster when acknowledged. And above all, never trust your reflection. No matter how real it looks. Eric had already broken most of them. He walked toward the mirror, cautiously, keeping a small distance. The hallway light flickered overhead, casting a weak glow across the old wooden floor. For the first few seconds, everything looked normal. He moved, his reflection mirrored him perfectly. Then Eric raised his left hand. The reflection raised its right, but only after a beat. A delay. It was subtle but clear, deliberate. Eric dropped his arm and took a shaky breath. It was still in there, still watching. He spoke quietly. "What do you want?" The reflection didn't respond, but the smile returned. That same chilling grin that felt too alive, too intentional. Eric clenched his fists and turned away. He needed to think. He couldn't live like this, paranoid, sleepless, constantly questioning if the person in the mirror was still him or something else entirely. That night, he tested the mirror again. He walked past it backwards, glancing quickly to catch any glitches. He tossed a ball behind his back and watched the reflection catch it slightly late. He whispered nonsense words and saw the reflection mouth different ones in return. It was mocking him now. But why hadn't it tried to get out again? What was it waiting for? That's when Eric remembered the dream written in the journal. I dreamed I was stuck behind the glass, screaming, watching someone else live my life. He started to wonder, what if the mirror doesn't take you? What if it replaces you? Not just copying, but switching. He stared at his own reflection, searching for anything off. It blinked when he blinked. It moved when he moved. But something in its eyes didn't match the fear pounding through his chest. He had a terrifying thought. What if the switch could happen when he was asleep? That would explain the previous tenant's disappearance. One moment he's real, the next he's the one trapped inside, watching someone else walk around in his skin. Eric raced to the bedroom, grabbed sticky notes and a marker, and started labeling everything in the apartment. He stuck a note to his bedroom mirror. "You are here." Another on the bathroom door. "Don't sleep yet." One on his own chest. The real Eric felt stupid, desperate, but he was out of options. And then he did something he never thought he would. He pulled a chair into the hallway and sat across from the mirror, facing it. He wasn't going to blink, wasn't going to sleep. He was going to watch it, all night if he had to. Time passed slowly. The hours dragged. Midnight came, then 2 a.m. The mirror stayed still, quiet. No movement, no change. Until the reflection did something new. It reached forward. Eric flinched. The reflection's hand touched the inside of the glass, palm flat, like it was testing the barrier. Eric remained frozen. The reflection tilted its head. The grin widened. Then it pointed at Eric. Eric stood slowly, backing away. The reflection mimed him, matching his panic with perfect calm. Then it mouthed words Eric couldn't hear. But this time he understood them perfectly. "You're tired. Sleep. Let me take over." Eric ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, and pushed a chair under the handle. He didn't sleep that night, but he finally understood something horrifying. The mirror wasn't going to force its way out. It was waiting for him to let his guard down. Eric was unraveling. It had been nearly 4 days since he'd last truly slept. He'd taken short naps in the bathtub, with the door locked and every mirror covered, but never for more than 20 minutes. Every time he closed his eyes for longer, he felt like something was pulling at his consciousness, like it was waiting just beyond sleep, waiting to drag him through the glass. His apartment had become a paranoid maze. Notes were taped everywhere. His reflection had been acting bolder with each passing day. Not just delayed movements now, but different ones. It waved when he didn't. It smiled when he scowled. It watched when he tried to ignore it. The worst part? Eric was starting to forget which one he was. He stood in the bathroom one morning. At least, he thought it was morning, hands gripping the sink, staring into the mirror. The bags under his eyes were dark, purple, like bruises. His face looked unfamiliar. His lips cracked. His eyes unfocused. The man in the mirror looked too still. Eric blinked. So did the reflection. He raised his hand. The reflection followed, perfectly timed. He shook his head quickly and turned away. He had to get out, if only for a few hours. Fresh air, sunlight, proof that he still existed outside of this thing's influence. He left the apartment and walked to the corner store, his hands trembling, face pale. He avoided every reflective surface. No phone screens, no windows. He paid for a bottle of water and some energy drinks without saying a word to the cashier. Back home, the apartment felt colder. Still, he stood at the door for a while before entering, like he was afraid someone else had opened the door with his key. That he'd come back and find himself already inside. But everything was quiet. The hallway, however, felt different. The mirror, still standing, still pristine, gave off a feeling now. Not like an object, more like an animal. Awake. Watching. Eric avoided looking at it and collapsed on the couch. He hadn't intended to sleep, but his body was giving out. Every bone ached. Every thought felt thick and slow. His eyes closed. In his dream, he stood in the hallway. Everything looked the same, only reversed. The furniture was mirrored, his posters backward, even the clock ticked counterclockwise. He turned slowly and saw himself standing in front of the mirror. But from the other side, his hands pressed against the inside of the glass, mouth open in a silent scream. Trapped. Frantic. Outside the mirror, the other Eric stood, calm and smiling. The dream version of him began to pound on the inside of the glass, eyes wide with terror. But the surface wouldn't break. It was like he was stuck in syrup, his movements slow and useless. Then the real-world Eric, the one outside the glass, turned and looked directly at him, and winked. Eric shot awake, drenched in sweat, heart racing so hard it hurt. The couch, his apartment. He was still here. He stumbled into the hallway, panting, and froze. The mirror was gone. No frame, no glass, no trace of it ever being there. Just an empty wall. Eric stood in stunned silence. He touched the spot where it once was. Smooth drywall. Had he imagined the whole thing? Then he heard a sound. A soft knock. From behind the bathroom mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Eric slowly walked toward the sound. He pushed open the bathroom door, and there it was, his reflection, waiting for him in the medicine cabinet mirror. Except, he hadn't turned the light on yet, and the reflection was fully lit. He stepped back, stepped forward. The mirror glass rippled like water. Eric turned and ran to the front door. He tried to open it, locked. Deadbolt jammed. He ran to the kitchen window, painted shut. He turned back and saw something moving in the hallway. A second Eric, smiling, calm. The real Eric backed into the bedroom, slamming the door shut. He was running out of time. He was slipping mentally, physically, and the thing in the mirror was getting stronger, smarter, and very, very close to taking his place. Eric barely slept now, if at all. The apartment had become a living nightmare. Mirrors no longer reflected his world, they watched it. Sometimes they whispered subtle hisses in the dead of night. Sometimes they showed things that weren't there, a door open that was shut, an expression that didn't belong on his face, or worse, someone else's face wearing his. He didn't know how much longer he could take it. That morning, or what he guessed was morning, he made a decision. He had to get out. Not just for a walk. Not just for a break. Forever. This apartment was cursed, infected. Maybe it was the mirror. Maybe it was him. Either way, he was leaving. He packed quickly, stuffing essentials into a duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, phone, charger. He opened his laptop and sent a quick message to his boss, family emergency. Won't be back. No explanation. He avoided the mirrors as he moved, especially the hallway one, which had returned at some point during the night. It stood exactly where it used to be, as if it had never vanished. As if it had changed its mind and wanted him to see it again. He refused to look into it. Eric stepped into the hallway and locked the apartment behind him. His hands were shaking, but he forced his body forward. The elevator took too long, so he bolted down the stairs. Each footstep echoed like a countdown in his skull. In the lobby, he passed a man walking in, middle-aged, bald, glasses, and for a second, the man stopped and looked directly at him. "Morning," he said. Eric nodded but didn't stop. As he pushed open the front door, he heard the man mutter behind him, "That guy looks just like." The rest was cut off by the slam of the door. Eric stepped out into daylight. For the first time in days, the sun touched his face and he felt it warm, real, alive. He didn't stop walking. He got on a bus, then another. He rode for hours until the city blurred into suburban roads and green stretches. He booked a cheap motel miles away under a fake name. No mirrors, he'd made sure. Even asked the clerk to have housekeeping remove the bathroom one. By evening, he was lying on the scratchy bedspread, staring at the popcorn ceiling, feeling something close to peace. No tapping. No smiles. Just quiet. He thought about what he'd gone through. About what that thing in the mirror really was. Was it a demon? A parasite? A fractured version of himself? Did it only infect him, or could it spread? He didn't know. He just knew he'd made it out. He closed his eyes, truly relaxed for the first time in weeks. That night he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in his old apartment. The hallway. The mirror. It was night again. He walked toward the reflection, calm, curious. On the other side, he stood waiting. Smiling. But this time, Eric didn't flinch. He raised a hand to the glass. So did the other Eric. Then, the reflection placed its palm against the inside of the mirror. Eric placed his hand against the cold surface too. And then, the reflection stepped through. Glass cracked, bent like liquid. It climbed out silent, graceful, then smiled at him. Same face. Same clothes. Same body. Eric couldn't move. He turned to run, but his legs failed him. And in that moment, he felt something heavy pull at his chest. Like he was being sucked backward. Through the mirror. He screamed. Eric awoke in the motel bed, heart pounding. Sunlight poured through the blinds. He touched his face, his chest, his arms. Still here. Still real. But something felt off. He stood slowly and walked to the bathroom. Even without a mirror, the glass on the shower door had a faint reflection. He stared at it. His face stared back. He smiled just to see. The reflection didn't. It just blinked. Slowly. And then it smiled a second too late. Eric backed away. A chill ran down his spine. He hadn't escaped. He just brought it with him. Eric didn't leave the motel that day. He sat in the corner of the room, knees pulled to his chest, facing the bathroom door. The faint reflection in the shower glass was still visible from where he sat. It hadn't moved. But Eric knew better now. The thing didn't need to be in the apartment. It didn't need the hallway mirror. It was in him. Or maybe it was him now. He could feel it. The slow corrosion of his thoughts. The way memories flickered, skipped, then returned. The strange moments when his reflection seemed more comfortable than he was, more real. Something was wrong inside him. He started filming himself with his phone. Not just vlogs, but tests. He'd set up the camera, leave the room, then return and watch the footage. He found gaps. Several seconds missing. Once, his body turned toward the camera and smiled while his voice kept narrating off-screen. That night, he woke to find his phone across the room, recording. The video showed him asleep, then sitting up, then standing and walking toward the glass shower door. He stared into it for nearly 10 minutes, not blinking, not moving. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost robotic. "He is breaking. Soon, I will be the only one." Eric deleted the footage, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Was he even still Eric? How would he know? He remembered the journal the old tenant had left behind, the warning signs, the slow decay, the eventual switch. Had the tenant's reflection taken over? Was that who had written the journal? And if Eric was the one left now, was he on borrowed time? He needed answers. That night, Eric did something reckless. He drove back to his apartment building. He didn't plan to go inside, just to see it, to remind himself that this all had a beginning, that maybe it could have an end. But when he got there, something felt wrong. Lights were on in his apartment. Shadows moved behind the curtains. He crept closer. Through the window, he saw himself, cooking dinner, whistling, looking perfectly at home. Clean, rested, Normal. Not a reflection. A second Eric. Living his life. Eric's hands trembled. He pounded on the door. No answer. He pounded harder. Open the door. I live here. Footsteps. The lock turned. The door creaked open. And there he was, same clothes, same face, only relaxed. Calm. Like he belonged. Can I help you? The man asked. Eric stared. You're me. The man tilted his head. I think you need help. I'm not crazy, Eric said. You came out of the mirror. You took my life. The other Eric nodded slowly. Then said something that shattered the last piece of Eric's reality. You were crazy. That's why you left. Remember? Eric stepped back. What? You lost it, man. Weeks ago. You stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. You ran away. He smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. I've just been keeping your life warm for you. Eric's voice cracked. I'm still me. The other Eric leaned closer, almost whispering. You were. But you left a door open. He slammed the door shut. Eric stumbled back onto the sidewalk, staring up at the window. Inside, the imposter watched him, smiling. That was the last time Eric saw himself. Weeks passed. The motel manager found Eric's room abandoned. Clothes still inside. Phone dead. No sign of forced entry. Just one thing left on the bed, a sticky note. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, if you're reading this, check the mirror. Make sure it's still you. Some say the human brain naturally trusts its own reflection. That no matter what it sees in the mirror, it believes it's looking at itself. But next time you pass a mirror, stop. Watch. Really watch. And if your reflection ever smiles when you don't, run. Before it does more than smile. Before it learns to open the glass. Before you become the one stuck behind it. Forever. 33.